The moment my daughter looked me in the eyes and called me embarrassing, the entire room went silent. There were cameras everywhere. Influencers, wealthy investors, people holding champagne glasses and pretending not to stare at me. I still remember Vanessa's face, cold, irritated, ashamed. "Mom, you always ruin everything," she snapped. "You're embarrassing me in front of everyone." And the worst part, I spent my whole life sacrificing everything so she would never feel embarrassed again. What Vanessa didn't know was that later that same night, I posted one video online. And within 48 hours, the perfect life she built from lies started collapsing in front of millions. If you've ever been hurt by someone you loved after giving them everything, I want you to stay with me until the end of this story. And before we continue, tell me in the comments, have you ever been made to feel small by your own family? Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I always read your comments late at night when I can't sleep. And if stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. My name is Jade Graham. I'm 62 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that if you loved your child hard enough, deeply enough, sacrificially enough, they would never turn their back on you. I know now that love doesn't always protect you from heartbreak. Sometimes it's the very thing that makes the heartbreak unbearable. I live alone in a small brick house outside Cleveland, Ohio. The paint on the porch is peeling a little, and the kitchen floor still creaks near the refrigerator because my late husband kept promising to fix it before he died. That was 23 years ago. My husband, Daniel, worked construction. One rainy November morning, a steel beam slipped loose at a job site downtown. By the time I got to the hospital, they already had a white sheet pulled over his face. Vanessa was only 11 years old. I still remember how tightly she held my hand at the funeral. "Are you going to leave me too?" she whispered. I dropped to my knees right there beside the church pew and promised her I never would. And I kept that promise. God knows I kept it. I worked double shifts as a nurse for years, sometimes triple shifts. I cleaned medical equipment overnight when the hospital was short-staffed. I skipped vacations. I skipped birthdays for myself. I wore the same winter coat for 12 years because Vanessa needed braces. Every sacrifice I made felt worth it whenever I looked at her. Vanessa was beautiful, even as a little girl. Big brown eyes, thick dark curls, a smile that could melt the anger out of anybody. But more than that, she was smart, painfully smart. She used to sit at our tiny kitchen table, doing homework while I soaked my swollen feet in hot water after work. "Mom," she used to say when I grow up, "I'm going to buy you a giant house." I'd laugh and tell her I didn't need a giant house. "All I need is you." Funny how life can punish you for sentences like that. Back then, Vanessa adored me. At least I thought she did. When she was 15, she used to brag about me to her friends. "My mom saves lives," she'd say proudly. I still remember overhearing that once from the hallway and crying quietly in the laundry room because I'd never felt so appreciated in my life. But somewhere along the way, something changed. At first, it was small things. After college, Vanessa moved to Chicago for a marketing internship. She started posting online more often. Fashion content, makeup tutorials, lifestyle videos. Then suddenly, one video exploded. Within a year, she had hundreds of thousands of followers. Then millions. Brands started sending her expensive handbags and free vacations. She moved into a luxury apartment downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and marble countertops that probably cost more than my yearly salary. And slowly, my daughter began speaking to me like I was someone she had outgrown. Her voice changed first. That soft Midwest accent disappeared. Suddenly, every sentence sounded polished and rehearsed. Then her stories changed. Whenever she talked about childhood online, she described herself as a girl who came from nothing, which was true. but she told those stories like she had survived alone, like nobody had been beside her. At first, I ignored it. I told myself I was being sensitive. Then the phone calls became shorter. "Hey Mom, I'm busy. Can I call you later? I'm at an event. I'm traveling." Weeks turned into months sometimes. But every Christmas, she mailed expensive gifts. Designer perfume, silk scarves, an automatic coffee machine I still didn't know how to use. It was like she believed gifts could replace presents. And maybe deep down, I allowed it because I was afraid. Afraid that if I complained, she'd disappear completely. My best friend Denise noticed the change long before I admitted it. Denise and I met 30 years ago during nursing orientation at County General Hospital. She's the kind of woman who can smell dishonesty before a person even opens their mouth. One afternoon, she came over while I was watching one of Vanessa's videos on my tablet. Vanessa was standing in a spotless white kitchen wearing a cream-colored cashmere outfit, smiling into the camera. "I built my life from absolutely nothing," she told her audience dramatically. "Nobody handed me anything." Denise snorted so loudly I nearly spilled my tea. "Nobody handed her anything," she said. "Jade, you practically handed that girl your entire life." I forced a laugh. "She doesn't mean it like that." Denise looked at me carefully. "You always defend her." "She's under pressure," I whispered. "Being successful doesn't give people permission to become cruel." I didn't answer. Because part of me already knew Denise was right. But mothers are strange creatures. We can see our children clearly and still refuse to believe our own eyes. A few months before the disaster happened, Vanessa stopped posting pictures with me completely. That hurt more than I admitted. When she was younger, she used to post birthday photos saying things like, "My beautiful mom," "My hero," "My best friend." Then suddenly, I disappeared from her page entirely. One day, I asked her about it during a phone call. "Oh, Mom," she said quickly, "my content manager says family posts don't perform as well anymore." I laughed like it didn't hurt. But after we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the wall for almost an hour. Because deep down, I understood what she really meant. I no longer fit the image she wanted the world to see. I was old, tired-looking, working class. I reminded her of everything she was trying to escape. Still, I loved her. That's the embarrassing part about being a mother. People think love disappears once someone hurts you enough. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it just keeps bleeding. Then 3 weeks before everything exploded online, Vanessa called me unexpectedly. And for the first time in months, she sounded excited. "Mom," she said brightly, "I want you to come to Chicago." My heart nearly stopped. "Really?" "Yeah. I'm launching my new beauty brand next month. It's a huge event." I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. I wouldn't miss it for the world. There was a small pause on the phone. Then Vanessa said quietly, "Just try not to make things awkward, okay?" I remember staring out the kitchen window after we hung up, pretending those words didn't sting. Because when your child spends years slowly teaching you that your existence embarrasses them, you become grateful for crumbs, even poisoned ones. For the next 3 weeks, I lived like a woman waiting for Christmas morning. It sounds foolish at my age, doesn't it? But when your child slowly drifts away from you for years, even the smallest invitation can feel like hope. Vanessa had invited me to Chicago, not just for dinner, not for a quick holiday visit. She wanted me at the biggest night of her career. At least that's what I kept telling myself. I cleaned my house top to bottom before the trip, even though nobody would be there to see it. I got my hair done at the little salon near the grocery store. I even started walking every morning so I'd have more energy during the event. Denise thought I was losing my mind. "You're acting like you're meeting the Queen of England," she muttered one afternoon while helping me fold laundry. I smiled. It's important to her. Denise gave me a look. No, Jade, it's important to you. That shut me up. Because she was right again. I wanted this trip to mean something. I wanted proof that my daughter still loved me underneath all the distance and coldness. A week before leaving, I went shopping for a dress. I hadn't bought fancy clothes in years. Nurses spend most of their lives in scrubs, and retired nurses spend them in sweatpants. The department store downtown smelled like expensive perfume and polished marble floors. Young women walked around carrying handbags that probably cost more than my first car. I wandered through the dresses, feeling completely out of place. Everything looked too young, too tight, too shiny. Finally, I found a dark blue dress that seemed elegant without trying too hard. I carried it carefully into the fitting room and stared at myself in the mirror after putting it on. For one tiny second, I almost felt beautiful again. Then I looked at the price tag. $480. I laughed quietly in the dressing room, because sometimes humiliation comes in small, private moments instead of dramatic public ones. I hung the dress back carefully and left the store pretending I hadn't been close to tears. That night, I pulled out an old storage box from the back of my closet. Inside were photographs, old birthday cards, receipts, memories, and buried beneath them was the cream-colored dress I wore to Vanessa's college graduation. I held it up slowly. It was simple, old-fashioned, a little outdated maybe. But when I touched the fabric, memories came rushing back. Vanessa running into my arms after getting her diploma. "Mom, we did it," she cried. "We, not me, not herself alone. We." I sat on the edge of my bed, holding that dress for nearly an hour before deciding I would wear it to Chicago. Maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I walked into that city already dressed like a memory Vanessa wanted to erase. The morning of my flight, Denise drove me to the airport. "You nervous?" she asked. "A little? She better appreciate this." I smiled softly. "She's my daughter." Denise sighed heavily. "That's exactly why I worry about you." At the airport, I kept checking my phone like an excited teenager. Vanessa had texted me the hotel address and itinerary. Nothing else. "No, can't wait to see you." "No, I miss you." No heart emojis, just logistics. But I ignored the ache in my chest and focused on the excitement instead. Chicago was cold and windy when I landed. I still remember standing outside O'Hare Airport gripping my coat while yellow taxis rushed past in endless noise and movement. Then I saw Vanessa's assistant holding a sign with my name on it. Not Vanessa herself, her assistant. The disappointment hit me so fast I almost felt embarrassed for expecting more. The assistant was a polished young man named Eric, with perfect teeth and expensive shoes. "Miss Graham?" he asked politely. "Yes. Vanessa's stuck in meetings, but she arranged for me to bring you to the hotel." "Oh," I said quietly. "Of course." The drive downtown felt surreal. Towering buildings, luxury stores, restaurants with lines stretching outside. Vanessa used to call me excitedly about this city when she first moved there. "Mom, everything here feels possible," she used to say. Now, I wondered if Chicago had simply taught her that people like me no longer belonged in her world. The hotel lobby looked like something from a movie. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, women in designer coats sipping cocktails in the middle of the afternoon. I suddenly became painfully aware of my sensible shoes and drugstore lipstick. Eric handed me a room key. "Vanessa will meet you tonight for dinner at 7. I nodded, but after he walked away, I stood alone in that giant lobby, feeling smaller than I had in years. That evening, I spent almost an hour getting ready. I curled my hair carefully, applied makeup slowly with trembling hands, and finally put on the cream-colored graduation dress. It fit a little tighter than it used to. Age changes your body in quiet, unforgiving ways. But looking in the mirror, I still smiled. Because somewhere deep inside me, I still believed my daughter would look at me and see her mother. Not an inconvenience, not an embarrassment, just Mom. At exactly 7 o'clock, Vanessa walked into the restaurant. And for one breathtaking second, all I saw was my little girl again. She looked stunning. Tall heels, sleek black coat, diamond earrings catching the candlelight. People turned to stare when she entered, but the moment her eyes landed on me, something shifted in her expression. Not warmth, assessment, like she was checking whether I fit the atmosphere around her. "Hi, Mom," she said, leaning down for a quick air kiss near my cheek. "Not even a real hug." "You look nice." "Nice." I smiled anyway. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." Vanessa sat down quickly and glanced around the restaurant. "You came alone, right?" I blinked. "Yes." "Good." Something about the word stung. The waiter arrived with menus, but Vanessa barely looked at hers. She seemed distracted, tense. Her phone kept lighting up with messages. At one point, she suddenly leaned closer across the table. "Mom, tomorrow is really important. I know. There are investors, media people, brand executives. I understand." She hesitated, then finally said it. "So please don't overshare." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "You know," she said awkwardly. "Don't tell those old stories about working 3 jobs or struggling financially or Dad's accident. People at these events don't really want heavy conversations." For a moment, I couldn't breathe, because those old stories were our life. They were the reason she was sitting in that restaurant wearing diamonds. But Vanessa kept talking nervously. "And maybe don't mention church stuff either, or personal family things." I looked down at my hands, the same hands that once held her feverish body through sleepless nights. The same hands cracked and bled from years of hospital sanitizer and overtime shifts. Suddenly, they looked old, embarrassingly old. "I'll behave," I whispered quietly. Vanessa smiled with visible relief. "Thank you." And right then, sitting across from my own daughter in one of the fanciest restaurants I had ever seen, I realized she wasn't inviting me into her world. She was managing me inside it. The launch event was held in a converted rooftop ballroom overlooking downtown Chicago. Everything about it screamed money. Tall glass windows reflected the city lights like diamonds. White orchids sat on every table. Waiters carried trays of champagne, while photographers floated through the room hunting for famous faces. And in the middle of it all stood my daughter. Vanessa looked radiant beneath the soft golden lighting. Her makeup was flawless. Her long, dark hair fell perfectly over one shoulder. She wore a fitted silver gown that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. People surrounded her constantly, laughing at her jokes, touching her arm, complimenting her, watching her. I stood near the entrance clutching my small purse, suddenly unsure where to put my hands. The room felt too loud and too polished for someone like me. A young woman near the bar glanced at me briefly before whispering something into her friend's ear. Both of them smiled politely in that fake way rich people do when they're trying not to stare. I looked down at my cream-colored dress and instantly regretted wearing it. It suddenly looked old. Not vintage, just old. Vanessa hurried over after noticing me standing alone. "There you are," she said quickly. Before I could answer, she leaned closer. "Just stay relaxed tonight, okay?" I forced a smile. "I am relaxed." Her eyes moved over me carefully. "Good." Then she spotted someone important across the room and immediately brightened. "Oh my God, Evelyn's here." Without another word, she walked away. I stood there watching my own daughter become warmer in 5 seconds with strangers than she'd been with me in 5 years. A waiter passed by carrying champagne glasses. I grabbed one mostly because I didn't know what else to do. I don't drink often, especially at my age, but I needed something to steady my nerves. For the next hour, I floated awkwardly through the party, pretending I belonged there. People smiled at me politely when they realized I was Vanessa's mother, but the conversations never lasted long. One man in an expensive navy suit asked where I lived. "Outside Cleveland," I said. "Oh," he replied with visible disinterest. Then he walked away before I could say another word. I spotted Vanessa across the room posing for photos in front of a giant glowing display with her brand name written in gold letters. Vanessa Graham Beauty. She looked so confident, so untouchable. For a moment, pride pushed aside the hurt. That's still my little girl, I thought. I remembered helping her practice speeches in our kitchen when she was 12 years old because she was terrified of public speaking. Now she commanded an entire ballroom without trembling once. I wished Daniel could have seen her. Around 9 o'clock, Vanessa finally brought her boyfriend over to meet me properly. "Mom, this is Marcus." Marcus Reed shook my hand with a smooth, practiced smile. "It's nice to finally meet you," he said. He was handsome in a very expensive way. Perfect haircut, perfect teeth, perfect posture. The kind of man who probably never worried about overdraft fees or unpaid medical bills. "You too," I replied. Marcus glanced around before lowering his voice slightly. "Vanessa talks about you all the time?" I nearly laughed at the lie. But before I could answer, Vanessa interrupted. "We should go greet the investors from LA. Marcus nodded immediately. "Of course." And just like that, they disappeared again. I tried not to let it hurt. I really did. But loneliness feels heavier in crowded rooms. At one point, I wandered toward a display table filled with beauty products in elegant glass packaging. A young employee smiled at me. "Would you like to try the serum?" "Oh no, honey," I said. "I wouldn't know what to do with all that." She laughed kindly. "You'd be surprised." For a few minutes, talking to her actually relaxed me. Then another guest approached us, a glamorous woman wearing a sparkling green dress. She glanced at my name badge. "Oh, you're Vanessa's mother," I smiled politely. "Yes." Her eyes widened dramatically. Vanessa's story is so inspiring. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "She's been through so much," the woman continued. I cried watching her interview about surviving such a difficult childhood. I blinked. "What interview? The podcast clip online?" she said. "About growing up emotionally neglected." The room suddenly felt hotter. I forced a small smile, even though my chest was tightening painfully. "She said she basically had to raise herself. That's heartbreaking." My fingers tightened around the champagne glass. "Oh," I whispered. The woman kept talking, completely unaware she was stabbing me with every sentence. "But look at her now. She turned all that pain into success. That's incredible." I couldn't hear anything after that. The music became muffled. The lights blurred slightly. Emotionally neglected. Raised herself. I wanted to believe there had been some misunderstanding. Maybe Vanessa exaggerated. Maybe people online twisted her words. But deep down, I already knew. I excused myself quietly and headed toward the restroom, trying to breathe normally. Inside the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. My face looked pale, older than usual. I suddenly remembered every fever I sat beside. Every school lunch I skipped so Vanessa could eat better food. Every night I drove through snowstorms after 12-hour shifts because she needed help with homework. Emotionally neglected. The words echoed inside my skull like a cruel joke. I splashed cold water on my wrists and told myself not to cry. Not here, Not tonight. When I finally walked back into the ballroom, the crowd had grown louder. Music pulsed softly through hidden speakers. Cameras flashed near the stage where Vanessa was preparing to give a speech. I tried weaving carefully through the crowd toward an empty table near the back. And that's when it happened. Someone bumped my shoulder lightly from behind. I lost my balance for half a second. The champagne glass slipped from my fingers. It shattered against the marble floor. The sound cracked through the ballroom like a gunshot. Conversation stopped instantly. Dozens of heads turned toward me. "Oh my goodness," I gasped. "I'm so sorry." Champagne splashed across the bottom of a woman's designer dress nearby. She jumped backward with a horrified expression. A waiter rushed forward. "It's okay, ma'am." Then I heard Vanessa's voice. Sharp, cold, humiliated. "Mom." The entire room seemed to freeze. Vanessa stormed toward me in towering silver heels, her face tight with anger. I said, "Be careful. I didn't mean to. You always do this." People nearby pretended not to listen, which somehow made it worse. "I'm sorry," I whispered again. But Vanessa wasn't finished. She grabbed my arm harder than necessary and pulled me toward the side of the room near the windows. "What is wrong with you?" she hissed. My eyes burned instantly. I just dropped a glass. "It's never just one thing with you." Her voice rose louder. Too loud. Several people turned to look openly now, including cameras, including phones. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. "You are embarrassing me in front of everyone." Silence. Complete silence. I stared at her face, waiting for regret to appear. It never did. Behind her, I noticed Marcus watching us from across the room. He didn't step in, didn't defend me, didn't stop her. Nobody did. And suddenly, standing there beneath those glittering lights, while strangers watched my humiliation unfold in real time, I realized something devastating. My daughter wasn't afraid I would ruin her image. I already had, simply by existing. I don't remember leaving the ballroom. One moment, I was standing there with hundreds of eyes on me while my daughter looked at me like I was something dirty she needed hidden away. The next moment, I was inside the hotel elevator, staring at my reflection in the mirrored walls. I looked shattered. My mascara had smeared beneath my eyes. My lips trembled uncontrollably. The cream-colored dress that once held such beautiful memories now felt heavy against my skin. For a terrible second, I actually blamed myself. Maybe I should have been more careful. Maybe I shouldn't have come. Maybe older mothers like me really didn't belong in glamorous places beside daughters who had reinvented themselves. That's what humiliation does. It teaches you to participate in your own destruction. When I reached my room, I kicked off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed in complete silence. The city lights flickered outside the giant window, but all I could hear was Vanessa's voice. "You're embarrassing me," over and over again. I don't know how long I sat there before my phone buzzed. A text from Denise. "How did it go?" I stared at the message for nearly a minute before typing back, "It was beautiful." Even then, I couldn't tell the truth, because mothers like me become experts at protecting our children's image, even while bleeding. I changed into pajamas slowly and washed my makeup off with shaking hands. Part of me wanted to order room service and disappear into bed forever. But around midnight, I realized I'd left my purse downstairs near the ballroom. At first, I considered forgetting it. Then I remembered my medication was inside, so I forced myself back downstairs. Most of the guests had already left by then. The ballroom was quieter now, though staff members still moved around, cleaning tables and packing equipment. I kept my head down as I walked toward the reception area. I didn't want anyone recognizing me as the pathetic mother from earlier. Then I heard Vanessa's voice. I froze instantly. She was standing around the corner near a private lounge area, speaking with 3 people, 2 investors, and a woman I recognized from earlier named Evelyn Brooks, her brand manager. None of them noticed me. At first, I intended to walk away, but then I heard Evelyn laugh softly. Your mother certainly wasn't part of the brand strategy. The group chuckled, even Vanessa. My chest tightened. Then Vanessa sighed dramatically. You have no idea how exhausting she is. One of the investors shook his head sympathetically. That must have been difficult growing up. And that's when my daughter said the words that changed something inside me forever. I basically raised myself, Vanessa replied. The world seemed to stop breathing. I stood completely still behind the wall, unable to move. Vanessa continued speaking casually like she was discussing the weather instead of destroying me. My mother always made everything about her problems, she said. We were broke constantly. I had to figure life out on my own. Evelyn nodded sympathetically. That's probably why your audience connects with you so deeply. You survived adversity. Vanessa gave a sad little smile. Honestly, my childhood was lonely. Lonely. The words sliced through me. I pressed my hand against the wall because suddenly my knees felt weak. Lonely. I remembered sleeping upright in hospital chairs when Vanessa had pneumonia at 8 years old because I refused to leave her alone overnight. I remembered sewing patches onto her jeans at 2 a.m. so she wouldn't get bullied at school. I remembered skipping meals so she could join cheerleading camp. Lonely, one of the investors leaned forward. It's incredible that you built this entire empire without support. And then Vanessa said something I will never forget for the rest of my life. Honestly, becoming successful was the only way to escape where I came from. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable silence, admiring silence. They looked at her like she was inspiring, brave, self-made. Meanwhile, I stood hidden behind a wall, feeling like someone had reached inside my chest and crushed my heart with their bare hands. Vanessa kept talking. You know, some people stay trapped in that mentality forever. Victim mentality. Small town mentality. Evelyn smirked slightly. And now look at you. Vanessa laughed softly. Trust me, I worked hard to become nothing like my mother. That sentence broke something in me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a bone cracking beneath too much pressure. For years I had defended her, made excuses, ignored warning signs, but hearing her erase my entire existence while standing inside a luxury ballroom funded by sacrifices she pretended never happened, I suddenly saw the truth clearly. Vanessa wasn't ashamed of one embarrassing moment. She was ashamed of me, of my age, my accent, my poverty, my history. I backed away slowly before they could see me. My hands were trembling so badly, I nearly dropped my room key. I found my purse at the front desk, thanked the employee mechanically, and returned upstairs in a daze. Inside my room, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not delicate tears, not movie tears. Ugly grief, the kind that shakes your ribs and leaves you gasping for air. I cried for the woman I used to be, the mother who believed sacrifice guaranteed love. Around 2 a.m, I opened my suitcase, searching for my medication. That's when I saw the old memory box tucked beneath my clothes. I had packed it almost absent-mindedly before leaving Cleveland. Something told me to bring it. Maybe mothers always sense when they're about to lose their children completely. I pulled the box onto the bed and slowly opened it. Inside were pieces of a life Vanessa now pretended never existed. Photographs of birthday parties in our tiny kitchen. Handmade Mother's Day cards. Hospital bills from after Daniel died. Old report cards with Vanessa's proud signatures across the top. Then I found the letter, folded carefully at the bottom. My stomach tightened instantly. I hadn't looked at it in years. The paper was slightly yellow now, edges worn with time. Vanessa wrote it when she was 19 years old, back before the money, before the followers, before she learned how to turn pain into branding. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. And suddenly, I was no longer sitting in a luxury hotel room in Chicago. I was back inside a church office 13 years earlier, while my daughter sobbed so hard she could barely breathe. "Mom," she cried that night, "please don't let them call the police." I closed my eyes tightly, because that was the real story Vanessa never told her followers. The story that could destroy everything she built. And for the first time in my life, I seriously considered telling the truth. 13 years earlier, Vanessa sat across from me inside Pastor Raymond Hill's office, looking like a terrified child. She was 19 years old then, still thin from stress, still wearing cheap sneakers with holes near the soles because we couldn't afford new ones that semester. And she was crying so hard, her entire body shook. "I'm sorry," she kept whispering. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I remember staring at her across that tiny church office, while rain hammered against the windows outside. At first, I couldn't even process what Pastor Raymond was telling me. The church had been missing money from the Youth Scholarship Fund, almost $8,000, and Vanessa had taken it. Even now, all these years later, saying those words inside my own mind still hurts. Not because of the money, because of the desperation that drove her there. Pastor Raymond folded his hands carefully on the desk. She confessed everything he said gently. Vanessa couldn't even look at me. Her face stayed buried in her hands. "I was going to put it back," she sobbed. "I swear I was." The money had been sitting in an unlocked office safe during a church fundraiser weekend. Vanessa volunteered there after school. Back then, she was drowning financially at college. Her student aid had been delayed. Her rent was overdue. She'd already gotten warnings about tuition payments, and instead of telling me how bad things were, she panicked. "You could have come to me," I whispered. "I already took too much from you," she cried. Those words nearly broke me then, because despite what Vanessa tells the world now, she did know what I sacrificed for her once. She knew. That's what makes this whole thing hurt even more. Pastor Raymond sighed heavily. "The board doesn't know yet," he said carefully. "Only Carolyn and I." Carolyn Price had been the church treasurer for nearly 30 years. A strict older woman with sharp eyes and a sharper memory. She stood quietly near the bookshelf that night, watching Vanessa with disappointment all over her face. "If this goes public," Carolyn said bluntly, "she could be arrested." Vanessa made a horrible, choking sound. I'll never forget it. It wasn't the sound of a criminal. It was the sound of a terrified teenager realizing one mistake might destroy her entire future. And I did what mothers do. I protected her, immediately, without hesitation. I turned to Pastor Raymond desperately. "There has to be another way." "Jade. She made a mistake." Carolyn crossed her arms tightly. "She stole from children." "I know," I whispered. "I know. God help me, I knew." But all I could see was my daughter's face, scared, ashamed, broken. I remember kneeling beside her chair and holding her freezing hands. "Look at me," I said softly. Vanessa finally lifted her tear-filled eyes. "We're going to fix this." "We?" she whispered. "Yes, we." I should have realized then how dangerous unconditional love can become. Because sometimes love teaches people they'll never face consequences. Pastor Raymond eventually agreed not to involve police under one condition: every dollar had to be repaid quietly and immediately. $8,000. At that point in my life, I barely had 800, but I promised anyway. The next few months nearly destroyed me. I sold Daniel's wedding ring first. I still remember holding it in the pawn shop parking lot before handing it over. 23 years of marriage reduced to cash inside a white envelope. I cried in my car afterward until my chest physically hurt. Then I picked up extra overnight shifts at the hospital. I worked 18-hour days sometimes. My feet bled through my shoes. I survived on coffee and aspirin. There were nights I became so exhausted driving home that I had to pull over because I was afraid I'd fall asleep at the wheel. But every time I thought about giving up, I pictured Vanessa in handcuffs, and I kept going. Vanessa cried every time she saw me working myself into the ground. "I'll quit school," she said once. "You will not. I don't deserve this." "No," I snapped. "You deserve a second chance." I meant that with my entire soul, because people make mistakes, especially young people drowning in fear. And despite everything happening now, I still believe that. One night, around 3 a.m, I came home after a double shift and found Vanessa asleep at the kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills and textbooks. She'd been waiting up for me. There was a note beside her elbow, written in messy blue ink. "Mom, I swear I'm going to spend the rest of my life making this up to you." I kept that note. It was still inside the memory box in my hotel room all these years later. Back then, Vanessa changed after the incident, or at least I believe she had. She became more motivated, more ambitious. She graduated with honors 2 years later. Pastor Raymond shook her hand proudly at graduation. Even Carolyn softened eventually. "Don't waste the mercy you were given," she told Vanessa quietly that day. Vanessa promised she wouldn't, and for a while she kept that promise. After college, she worked harder than anyone I knew. Long hours, small apartments, terrible bosses. I was proud of her. So proud. When her online career finally took off years later, I thought maybe all our suffering had meant something. Maybe those brutal years had simply been the price of survival. But now, sitting alone in that hotel room in Chicago, I realized something horrifying. Vanessa didn't view her second chance as mercy. She viewed it as proof she could erase the truth and reinvent herself completely, including erasing me. I unfolded the old apology letter slowly with trembling fingers. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. "Mom, you saved my life tonight. I know I don't deserve what you're doing for me. I'll never forget this as long as I live." I stared at those words for a long time. Never forget. The irony almost made me laugh. Outside the hotel window, Chicago glowed cold and beautiful beneath the darkness. Somewhere out there, Vanessa was probably celebrating her successful launch party with investors and influencers, probably telling more stories about surviving her terrible mother. Meanwhile, the woman she called embarrassing was sitting alone, holding proof that her entire public image was built on lies. I should have felt angry. Instead, I mostly felt tired. Deeply tired. There's a special kind of exhaustion that comes from loving someone who keeps rewriting your existence until you barely recognize yourself anymore. Around 4 a.m, my phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa. "Sorry about earlier. You know how stressful these events are." That was it. No real apology. No, "Are you okay?" No, "I love you." Just damage control. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then I looked down at the letter again. At the evidence. At the years of sacrifice nobody knew about. And for the first time in my entire life, a dangerous thought entered my mind. Maybe protecting Vanessa had not made her better. Maybe it had taught her she could destroy people and still be saved afterward, including me. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Vanessa's voice again. "You're embarrassing me." Then the other words followed. I basically raised myself. I worked hard to become nothing like my mother. By sunrise, something inside me had changed. Not disappeared, not healed, changed. For years I had carried my love for Vanessa like a shield. That morning, for the first time, it felt more like a wound. I sat near the hotel window wrapped in a blanket, watching pale gray light spill across the city skyline. My coffee had gone cold an hour earlier, but I kept holding the cup anyway because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Part of me wanted to go home immediately. Pack my suitcase, call a taxi. Disappear quietly the way older women are expected to disappear when they become inconvenient. But another part of me, a smaller, angrier part, kept asking the same question over and over again. Why am I still protecting her? Around 8 o'clock, my phone rang. Denise. I almost ignored it, but Denise had known me too long to be fooled by fake, cheerful text messages. The moment I answered, she said, "What happened?" That's all it took. I broke apart instantly. I started crying so hard, I couldn't even form words at first. Denise stayed silent while I struggled to breathe. Then slowly, painfully, I told her everything. The ballroom, the humiliation, the lies, the investors, the stories Vanessa told about raising herself. When I finally stopped talking, Denise was quiet for several seconds. Then she said something that stayed with me. "Jade, you have spent your entire life protecting a version of your daughter that no longer exists." I closed my eyes tightly. "She's still my child." "I know," Denise whispered. "That's what makes this so cruel." I looked toward the memory box sitting open on the hotel bed. "The letter is still here," I said quietly. "What letter?" "The apology letter. From the church incident." Denise inhaled sharply. Oh my God. She promised she'd never forget. And now, she's turned your suffering into marketing material. The bitterness in Denise's voice startled me, because I realized she was angrier than I was. Maybe that's why I loved her. Friends sometimes defend us harder than we defend ourselves. "She's under pressure," I whispered automatically. Denise actually groaned. "Listen to yourself. Jade, she humiliated you in public and built her career by lying about you." I didn't answer, because every defense suddenly sounded pathetic even to me. Denise's voice softened. "You know what the saddest part is? What you still sound more worried about hurting her than hurting yourself." That sentence sat heavily in my chest long after we hung up. Because it was true. Even then, even after everything, I still didn't want revenge. I just wanted Vanessa to stop being ashamed of me. Around noon, I checked out of the hotel. Vanessa didn't contact me again. No goodbye. No request to meet before I left. Nothing. I sat in the airport for nearly 2 hours waiting for my flight back to Cleveland, surrounded by strangers rushing through terminals with coffees and rolling suitcases. And somewhere between Gate C-17 and a stale blueberry muffin, I couldn't finish eating. I made the decision. Not a dramatic decision. Not revenge. Truth. That's what I told myself. Just truth. Back home, the silence inside my house felt unbearable. Usually I loved the quiet. After decades working in noisy hospitals, peace became sacred to me. But this silence felt empty, haunted. I unpacked, slowly placing the cream-colored dress back into the closet with trembling hands. Then I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the memory box again. The apology letter rested on top. Beside it sat old photographs of Vanessa smiling beside me before fame taught her embarrassment. I don't know how long I sat there before Denise knocked on my door carrying takeout containers. She walked inside, took one look at my face and muttered, "Oh, honey." That nearly made me cry again. We ate Chinese food at the kitchen table while rain tapped softly against the windows. Finally, Denise asked quietly, "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do." I looked down at my hands. I can't destroy her life. Denise leaned back in her chair. "Jade, your daughter, already destroyed part of yours. That's different." "Why? Because I'm her mother." Denise stared at me for a long moment. "Do you know why people like Vanessa keep crossing lines?" I frowned slightly. "Because nobody ever makes them face what they've done." Her words unsettled me because deep down, I feared she was right. For years, I had rescued Vanessa from consequences. Financial problems, bad relationships, mistakes, excuses. I called it love. But maybe love without accountability becomes something poisonous. That night, after Denise left, I found myself sitting in front of my old laptop. I opened social media almost without thinking. Vanessa's launch party videos were everywhere already. Clips of her speech, photos on red carpets, interviews, perfect lighting, perfect makeup, perfect lies. Then I saw it. A short video clip someone had uploaded from the ballroom. My stomach dropped instantly. It was me, standing there frozen after dropping the champagne glass while Vanessa snapped at me in front of everyone. The caption read, "Influencer Vanessa Graham has awkward moment with her mom at brand launch." Hundreds of comments flooded beneath it. Some people defended Vanessa. She's probably stressed. Others mocked me. That mom looks messy. My mother would never embarrass me like that. One comment nearly stopped my heart. No wonder Vanessa never posts her. I closed the laptop so fast it startled me. Then I sat there in darkness, breathing hard. For the first time in my life, I understood what public humiliation really felt like. Not because strangers mocked me, because my own daughter silently agreed with them. Around midnight, I walked back into the kitchen and looked at the memory box again. Then slowly, I picked up my phone. I opened the camera app. At first, I just stared at myself on the screen. No makeup, gray hair, tired eyes, an ordinary older woman sitting in an ordinary kitchen. The exact kind of woman Vanessa spent years trying to erase. I almost put the phone down. Who would care what someone like me had to say? But then I remembered the ballroom, the lies, the shame, and before I could lose my nerve, I pressed record. "Hello?" I said quietly. My voice trembled immediately. I swallowed hard and tried again. "My name is Jade Graham." I paused. I'm not used to speaking online. Honestly, I barely know how any of this works. A weak laugh escaped me. Then, suddenly, tears filled my eyes. I watched a video tonight where people called me embarrassing. I looked down briefly before continuing. I guess I just wanted to say something because sometimes there are mothers out there who give everything they have to their children. I didn't mention Vanessa's name. Not once. I didn't mention the church, or the letter, or the lies. I simply talked about sacrifice, about loving someone so much you slowly disappear inside their success, about the pain of becoming invisible to your own child. When I finally stopped recording, I realized nearly 12 minutes had passed. My face looked exhausted on the screen. My voice cracked several times. It wasn't polished. It wasn't strategic. It was simply true. And somehow, that terrified me more than anger ever could. I stared at the upload button for almost 5 full minutes. Then, with trembling fingers, I posted the video. I expected maybe a few hundred people to watch the video. A few sympathetic comments. Maybe some older women relating to my story before the internet moved on to the next scandal 20 minutes later. Instead, I woke up the next morning to chaos. My phone would not stop vibrating. Notifications flooded the screen faster than I could read them. Messages, comments, friend requests, missed calls. At first, I genuinely thought something terrible had happened to a family member. Then I opened the video. 3 million views. I physically stopped breathing for a second. The comment section moved so fast it blurred. I'm crying watching this. That daughter should be ashamed. My mother sacrificed everything for me too. You can hear the heartbreak in this woman's voice. Thousands of people shared their own stories beneath mine. Women abandoned by children they raised. Parents forgotten after sacrificing their youth. Adult children admitting they suddenly wanted to call their mothers and apologize. The internet had turned my pain into something public overnight. And somehow, people believed me. Not because I attacked Vanessa, because I didn't. That's what made it powerful. I never called her evil, never screamed, never exposed her secrets. I simply sounded wounded, and wounded truth is difficult to fake. By noon, clips of my video were everywhere. Reaction channels, commentary pages, TikTok stitches. People compared my calm sadness to Vanessa's polished self-made survivor image, and suddenly cracks began appearing in the story she'd carefully built online. Then my phone rang. Vanessa. I stared at her name flashing across the screen while panic spread through my stomach. Part of me still wanted to protect her. Even then, I answered quietly. Hello? What the hell is wrong with you? Her voice exploded through the phone so loudly, I pulled it away from my ear. I closed my eyes. Vanessa. No, you don't get to do this. Do you realize what's happening online right now? My chest tightened. I never mentioned your name. You didn't have to, she snapped. Everybody knows it's me. I stayed silent. Vanessa sounded frantic. Not hurt, not sad. Frantic. My sponsors are calling me, she continued. People are attacking me in comments. Evelyn is freaking out. For one brief moment, I waited for her to ask if I was okay. She never did. Instead, she hissed, You made me look abusive. I almost laughed at the irony. Made. As though I'd created something that didn't already exist. I only told the truth, I whispered. Oh, please, she scoffed. You sat there crying on camera to manipulate people. Manipulate. The word hit me hard, because it sounded exactly like something Vanessa would accuse others of whenever they threatened her image. I wasn't manipulating anyone. Then delete it. My fingers tightened around the phone. What, delete the damn video? There it was. Not Mom, let's talk. Not I'm sorry. Just damage control again. I looked out my kitchen window at the gray Cleveland sky. You humiliated me in front of hundreds of people. Vanessa let out a sharp, angry breath. Oh my God, are you seriously still upset about that? Still upset, as if public humiliation had an expiration date. You called me embarrassing. You embarrassed me. The silence after that sentence felt enormous, because for the first time she said it plainly. No excuses, no hiding. My own daughter genuinely believed I embarrassed her. You know what your problem is? Vanessa continued bitterly. You always make everything emotional. That's why I left. I swallowed hard. You left because you were ashamed. She went quiet instantly. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Then, colder than before, she said, You have no idea what it was like growing up the way we did." Something inside me cracked again, because I had spent my entire adult life trying to protect her from exactly that pain. "I know exactly what it was like," I whispered. "No, you don't," she snapped. "You don't know what it feels like to walk into school wearing thrift store clothes while everyone else had money." I closed my eyes. "You think I wanted that for you? At least admit you failed me." That sentence physically hurt. I pressed my hand against my chest instinctively. Failed her after everything, Vanessa. But she was already spiraling. "You know how hard I worked to build my life. Do you know how hard it is constantly worrying people will see where you came from?" Finally, there it was, the truth hidden beneath all the anger. Not hatred, shame. Raw, poisonous shame. And somehow that hurt even more, because it meant every time Vanessa looked at me, she saw poverty, weakness, the life she escaped. "I'm your mother," I whispered. "And I'm trying to survive." She shot back. Then she hung up. I sat frozen at my kitchen table long after the call ended. My coffee had gone cold again. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, millions of strangers debated my relationship with my daughter online, while the actual relationship collapsed in real time. By evening, the internet became uglier. Some people started digging through Vanessa's old content. Compilations appeared online comparing her self-made speeches with my video. Headlines exploded everywhere. "Influencer's mother speaks out the truth behind Vanessa." Graham fans turn against beauty mogul. Then came the cruelty. People flooded Vanessa's pages with snake emojis and insults. Some called her heartless, others called her fake. And strangely enough, watching it didn't make me feel better. It made me sick, because no matter what she'd done, that was still my little girl. Around 8 that evening, Denise came over carrying groceries and a bottle of wine. "You look pale," she said immediately. "I think I made a mistake." Denise stared at me in disbelief. "Jade, you told your truth, and now strangers are destroying her." "No," Denise corrected sharply. "The lies are destroying her." I rubbed my temples. "I never wanted this." "I know." She sounded terrified on the phone. Denise softened slightly. "Good." I looked at her. She should be terrified. "Do you think she ever stopped to think how terrified you felt being humiliated publicly?" I didn't answer, because guilt was already crawling through me. That's the terrible thing about motherhood. Even when your child stabs you, part of you still worries whether the knife hurt their hand. Later that night, after Denise left, I opened social media again. Vanessa had finally responded. She uploaded a crying video titled, "Setting the Record Straight." I stared at the thumbnail for several seconds before pressing play. Vanessa sat in perfect lighting, wearing a white sweater, with glossy tears sliding carefully down her cheeks. "I never wanted to do this publicly," she began shakily. Instantly, my stomach dropped, because I knew that voice. Not daughter Vanessa. Influencer Vanessa. Performing Vanessa. I've spent years trying to heal from a very emotionally complicated relationship with my mother, she continued. Comments flooded beneath the video in real time. Some supported her immediately. Others accused her of lying. Then Vanessa said something that made my blood run cold. My mother has always struggled with controlling behavior and emotional manipulation. I stared at the screen in disbelief. She often used sacrifice to guilt me growing up, Vanessa continued tearfully. And honestly, making that video feels like another attempt to control my narrative. Narrative. Not relationship. Narrative. Like our lives were content strategies now. Then came the final blow. "I still love my mother," Vanessa whispered dramatically, But sometimes toxic parents can't handle seeing their children succeed. Toxic parents. I physically covered my mouth, because suddenly I understood something terrifying. Vanessa wasn't going to apologize. She was going to destroy me first, and just as panic began swallowing me whole. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello," a calm, older woman's voice responded. "Jade. Yes, this is Carolyn Price." My entire body went still. I saw the videos, she said quietly. Silence filled the line. Then Carolyn spoke the words that changed everything again. "I think it's time someone told the whole truth." I hadn't heard Carolyn Price's voice in almost 10 years. But the moment she spoke, I was 20 years younger again, sitting in church pews on Sunday mornings, while she balanced financial ledgers with terrifying precision and judged everybody silently over her reading glasses. Carolyn was not a sentimental woman. She believed in facts, consequences, discipline. Which is why her calling me now made my stomach twist with dread. "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. "I mean," Carolyn replied calmly, "your daughter is lying to the entire country." I sat down slowly at my kitchen table. Rain still tapped softly against the windows, but inside my chest, everything suddenly felt dangerously still. "She was young," I whispered automatically. Carolyn sighed heavily. "Jade, after all these years you still do this. Do what protect her before you protect yourself." I closed my eyes, because even now, even after the humiliation, the lies, the cruelty, my first instinct was still to defend Vanessa. Carolyn's voice softened slightly. "I'm not calling because I hate your daughter." "Then why?" "Because I watched you destroy yourself to save her. And now she's rewriting history while people attack you online." Tears burned behind my eyes instantly. I never wanted any of this to become public. "I know. And I don't want revenge," good Carolyn replied. "Because revenge rots people. Truth is different." That sentence stayed with me. Truth is different. We agreed to meet the next morning at a small diner outside Akron, halfway between our towns. I barely slept again that night. Social media had become a war zone by then. Vanessa's supporters accused me of emotional manipulation. My supporters called Vanessa narcissistic and cruel. Reaction channels dissected our lives like entertainment. People debated whether mothers deserved loyalty from adult children. Strangers analyzed my facial expressions like courtroom evidence. At one point, around 3 in the morning, I found myself reading comments from women my age who wrote things like, "My son stopped inviting me places because I look too old. My daughter pretends I don't exist online." This story broke my heart. I cried reading them. Not because I felt famous, because I realized how many parents quietly disappear inside their children's shame. The next morning, I drove through gray Ohio drizzle to meet Carolyn. She was already sitting in a booth when I arrived. Older now, smaller somehow, but still sharp-eyed and intimidating. The waitress poured coffee while Carolyn studied me carefully. "You look exhausted." "I am." "You've lost weight." I laughed weakly. "Public humiliation diet." Carolyn did not laugh. Instead, she reached into her leather bag slowly and placed a thick manila folder on the table between us. The sight of it made my pulse jump. "Oh no," I whispered. "Yes." "You kept all this?" "Of course I did," Carolyn replied. "Church financial records don't disappear because people feel emotional." My hands trembled slightly as I touched the folder. Inside were copies of everything: withdrawal reports, handwritten repayment records, internal church notes, and then Vanessa's confession statement. I stared at her 19-year-old handwriting while nausea rolled through my stomach. I had forgotten how frightened she sounded back then. I take full responsibility. Mrs. Price and Pastor Raymond did not know I was taking the money. My mother had nothing to do with this. My vision blurred slightly. Carolyn watched me carefully. She tried to protect you even then, she said quietly. I swallowed hard. I know, and you protected her. She was a child. She was old enough to understand consequences. The waitress returned briefly with eggs and toast. Neither of us touched. I kept staring at the folder. You really think I should expose this? I asked softly. Carolyn leaned back. No. I looked up in surprise. No, I think your daughter should tell the truth herself. A painful laugh escaped me. She won't. Carolyn's expression hardened. Then eventually the truth tells itself. Silence settled between us for several seconds. Finally, I whispered, if this comes out, it could ruin her. Carolyn held my gaze directly. Jade, your daughter built a business around publicly ruining you first. That hurt, because it was true. I looked back down at the documents. People online are already attacking her, and people are attacking you too. That's different. Carolyn's eyes narrowed slightly. Why? Because she's my daughter. The words echoed silently inside my mind. Because mothers are trained to absorb damage quietly. Carolyn sighed again. You know what bothered me most watching her video yesterday? What she sounded rehearsed. I nodded slowly, because I noticed that too. The tears, the pauses, the perfect lighting. Even her pain looked branded. Meanwhile, my own video had been filmed in bad kitchen lighting while I wore an old sweatshirt and tried not to cry into the camera. Maybe that's why people trusted me. Pain without performance feels different. Carolyn slid another paper toward me. This is the repayment ledger. I froze. Every extra shift I worked, every payment, every sacrifice, documented. My throat tightened painfully. I saw dates that brought memories crashing back instantly. January 14th, double shift. February 3rd, sold wedding ring. March 22nd, emergency payment after Vanessa's tuition warning. God, I had nearly killed myself fixing her mistake, and now the same daughter told millions of people I had failed her. Carolyn's voice interrupted my thoughts. You loved her very much. I laughed bitterly. Still do. That's obvious. I wiped my eyes, quickly embarrassed to cry in public. Do you think I created this? I whispered. Carolyn frowned slightly. What do you mean by protecting her too much? Carolyn was quiet for a long moment before answering honestly. A little yes. The truth landed heavily. Not cruel, not accusatory. Just honest. When someone never faces consequences, Carolyn continued gently, they start believing their survival matters more than everybody else's pain. I stared out the diner window. Vanessa at 11 years old flashed through my mind. Vanessa at 19 crying in Pastor Raymond's office. Vanessa at 34 standing beneath ballroom lights calling me embarrassing. 3 different people. And somehow the same person too. I don't know what to do, I admitted. Carolyn folded her hands together. Then let me ask you something. I looked at her. If Daniel were alive and saw the way she treated you, what would he say? The question nearly shattered me, because Daniel would have defended me instantly, without hesitation. He would have never allowed me to shrink myself this way. Tears rolled down my cheeks before I could stop them. Carolyn reached across the table and squeezed my hand gently for the first time in maybe 30 years. You are not the villain in this story, Jade. I broke down completely then, not loudly, just quietly. The kind of crying that comes from years of swallowing pain because you thought that's what love required. When we finally stood to leave, Carolyn pushed the folder toward me. Keep it, I can't. Yes, you can. I stared at the documents, the evidence, the truth. I still don't want to destroy her, I whispered. Carolyn nodded slowly. That's because you're her mother. Then her expression turned serious again. But Jade, if she keeps lying publicly eventually, you may have no choice left. I drove home with the folder sitting heavily in the passenger seat beside me, like a loaded weapon, and deep down, I already knew the internet wasn't finished with either of us yet. 3 days later, Vanessa went on Trevor Miles's podcast. And that was the moment everything truly exploded. I almost didn't watch it. By then, I was emotionally exhausted. Every time I opened my phone, I saw another stranger discussing my relationship with my daughter like it was a television series. Some people defended me fiercely. Others accused me of emotionally blackmailing Vanessa for attention. The internet always needs heroes and villains. Real human beings become secondary. But when Denise called me that afternoon and said, "Turn on YouTube right now," something in her voice made my stomach drop instantly. I opened the live stream with trembling hands. Trevor Miles sat across from Vanessa inside a sleek studio, glowing with blue lights and expensive microphones. Vanessa looked perfect. Perfect makeup, perfect posture, perfect sadness. And suddenly, I realized something terrifying. My daughter knew exactly how to perform vulnerability without actually being vulnerable. Trevor leaned forward sympathetically. Vanessa, the internet has been brutal toward you this week. Vanessa sighed softly. It's been hard. Hard. That word nearly made me laugh. Hard was working 18-hour shifts while your feet bled through your shoes. Hard was selling your dead husband's wedding ring to keep your child out of jail. But Vanessa continued speaking calmly. I didn't want family issues online, she said sadly. But when someone emotionally manipulates you, your entire life, eventually boundaries become necessary. Denise muttered something furious beside me on the couch. I couldn't speak. I just stared at the screen while my daughter dismantled me in front of millions. Trevor nodded sympathetically. A lot of successful people deal with parents who resent their growth. Then Vanessa said the sentence that finally destroyed the last piece of restraint I had left. My mother always needed to be the victim, she said quietly. Honestly, she's just a jealous old woman who can't accept that I built a life bigger than hers. Jealous old woman. The room around me seemed to go silent. Not because the insult itself was shocking, because suddenly I understood something clearly. Vanessa genuinely believed her own lies now. This wasn't panic anymore, or temporary cruelty. She had rewritten our entire history inside her own mind until I became the obstacle instead of the person who saved her. Denise grabbed the remote and muted the television. Oh, hell no. I kept staring at the frozen image of Vanessa's face on the screen. She left me no choice, Denise whispered. I looked down slowly at the manila folder resting on my coffee table. The evidence, the repayment records, the confession letter. For days I had treated those documents like poison. Now they felt heavier, necessary. I can still stop this, I whispered weakly. Denise turned toward me in disbelief. Stop what? Before it gets worse. Jade. Her voice cracked with frustration. She is publicly destroying you. She's hurting. So are you? I flinched because she was right. But motherhood changes your brain in terrible ways. Even while drowning, you still search for reasons your child deserves saving first. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen again. The folder lay open before me. For hours, I stared at Vanessa's old apology letter. The handwriting looked so young, so frightened, So human. Nothing like the polished woman sitting in podcast studios calling me toxic. I wanted to hate her. That would have been easier. But every time anger started rising inside me, another memory interrupted. Vanessa, asleep on my shoulder during thunderstorms. Vanessa crying after her father's funeral. Vanessa hugging me after college graduation saying, "We did it, Mom." That's the cruelest part about loving someone who changes. Your heart keeps remembering versions of them that no longer exist. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. This time, it was Evelyn Brooks, Vanessa's manager. Her voice sounded exhausted. "Mrs. Graham." "Yes, I'm calling because this situation is becoming catastrophic." I almost laughed at the corporate wording. Catastrophic. Like my pain was a marketing crisis. "She needs to stop talking about me publicly," I said quietly. Evelyn hesitated. "I agree. That surprised me." "She's losing sponsors," Evelyn continued carefully. "Brands are nervous. And honestly," Evelyn sighed heavily, "Vanessa keeps making it worse." I closed my eyes. Because deep down, I already knew that too. Every interview, every defensive video, every polished explanation. The audience trusted her less each time. Pain performs differently from strategy, and people can feel the difference. Evelyn lowered her voice. "She's terrified right now." For a second, my maternal instincts surged again. Terrified. My little girl was terrified. Then I remembered the ballroom. "You're embarrassing me." The softness inside me hardened slightly. She should have thought about that before lying. Silence stretched across the line. Finally, Evelyn said quietly, "She told me you'd never fight back." That sentence hit me harder than anything else. Because it meant Vanessa knew exactly how much I loved her, and weaponized it. After the call ended, I sat motionless for a long time. Then slowly, I made another video. This one was different. No trembling introduction. No vague sadness. Just truth. I placed the old documents carefully on the kitchen table beside me before pressing record. "My name is Jade Graham," I began calmly, "and I need to correct something." My hands still shook, but my voice didn't. "For the past week, my daughter has publicly described herself as someone who survived alone." I paused. "That is not true." I held up the repayment ledger first. In 2011, Vanessa made a mistake that could have destroyed her future. I never said the exact amount stolen at first. Never used humiliating language. I protected her dignity even then. But I told the truth. About the church. About the scholarship fund. About the nights I worked myself sick to repay the money quietly so my daughter could still have a future. Then finally, I unfolded the apology letter. My throat tightened instantly as I read aloud. "Mom, you saved my life tonight. I'll never forget what you did for me." Silence filled my kitchen after I finished reading. I looked directly into the camera. "I never wanted to expose this," I whispered. "But after being called toxic, manipulative, and jealous publicly, I can no longer stay silent while my entire life is rewritten." Tears filled my eyes again. Not dramatic tears. Exhausted ones. "I loved my daughter enough to save her once," I said softly. "Maybe I loved her so much that I accidentally taught her truth didn't matter." Then I ended the recording. I stared at the upload button for nearly 10 minutes, because I knew this would change everything permanently. Once the internet saw those documents, there would be no going back. No private repair. No quiet reconciliation. Only fallout. But then I remembered something Carolyn said. Truth is different. So finally, I uploaded the video, And within 1 hour, the internet detonated. Vanessa's apology letter spread across every platform imaginable. Reaction channels replayed the clips endlessly. Former fans flooded her pages demanding answers. Major beauty accounts posted statements distancing themselves from her brand. Then came the headlines. Influencer accused of fabricating backstory leaked letter changes everything. Vanessa Graham faces massive backlash. By morning, 2 sponsorships had already dropped her publicly. By afternoon, 3 more followed. And late that evening, as I sat frozen on my couch, watching the collapse unfold online, my phone rang again. Vanessa. This time when I answered, she wasn't angry. She was crying. Real crying, not influencer crying. And somehow, that terrified me more than anything else so far. The first thing Vanessa said when I answered the phone was, "You ruined my life." Not hello, not mom, just accusation. Her voice sounded broken in a way I had never heard before. Raw, panicked, breathing unevenly between sobs. For one dangerous moment, my instincts took over immediately. I wanted to comfort her. That's what mothers do, even after destruction, even after betrayal. Vanessa. No, she cried. Do you have any idea what's happening right now? I closed my eyes slowly. Because yes, I did. Her brand partnerships were collapsing publicly one after another. Comment sections had turned vicious. Reaction channels were dissecting every old interview she'd ever given. People online were calling her a fraud. And underneath all the anger flooding the internet, there was something else too. Disappointment. Because audiences can forgive cruelty faster than dishonesty. But people hate feeling manipulated. You exposed me, Vanessa whispered. I sat quietly at my kitchen table, gripping the phone. You exposed me to millions of people. My chest tightened painfully. For days I had prepared myself for rage. Not this. Not hearing my daughter sound genuinely shattered. You exposed me first? I said softly. Silence. Then another sob. I was trying to survive. The sentence hit me strangely hard because part of me believed she meant it. Not survival from poverty, not survival from abuse, survival from shame. The kind that burrows so deep inside people, they start amputating pieces of themselves to escape it, including family, including truth. They hate me now, Vanessa whispered. I looked toward the dark kitchen window. They hated me too. More silence. Then suddenly her voice sharpened again. You could have talked to me privately. A bitter laugh almost escaped my throat. Like you talked to me privately on that podcast, that's different. How you humiliated me publicly? I stared at the ceiling. The irony was so enormous I almost couldn't process it. Finally, I whispered, "Do you even hear yourself anymore?" That made her go quiet. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Vanessa said something that chilled me completely. Marcus left. I blinked. What, he packed his things this morning? Her breathing became shaky again. He said this whole thing revealed character issues. The words sounded rehearsed coming from her mouth, like Marcus had delivered them carefully. And suddenly, I pictured my daughter alone inside her luxury apartment, surrounded by collapsing sponsorship deals and unanswered texts. The image hurt me more than I wanted it to. He loved the successful version of me, Vanessa whispered bitterly. Not this. I almost responded immediately. I almost said, now you know how I felt. But I couldn't. Because despite everything, hearing pain in her voice still hurt me physically. That's the terrible thing nobody tells you about motherhood. Love doesn't switch off when respect disappears. It lingers, bleeding quietly. The next few days became unbearable. News sites picked up the story nationally. Daytime talk shows discussed toxic influencer culture. Psychologists on social media analyzed Vanessa's behavior endlessly. Some blamed narcissism, others blamed trauma, others blamed social media itself. Meanwhile, my own life became strangely unrecognizable overnight. People recognized me at grocery stores. Women approached me crying. One cashier squeezed my hand and whispered, "You reminded me to call my mother." I smiled politely, but inside, I felt exhausted beyond words. Because none of those people understood the truth. I didn't feel victorious. I felt like I had detonated my own family. Then the relatives started calling. That was somehow worse than the internet. My cousin Lorraine phoned first. "How could you do this to your own daughter?" she snapped immediately. I closed my eyes. She publicly lied about me for years. She's young. She's 34. She made mistakes. So what? I laughed softly in disbelief. So did I, apparently. Lorraine sighed dramatically. "You should have handled this privately. Vanessa made it public first. That doesn't matter. Mothers are supposed to protect their children." That sentence haunted me after we hung up, because it struck directly at the guilt already eating me alive. What if I had failed some sacred maternal duty? What if truth did not excuse betrayal? More relatives followed. Some quietly supported me. Most didn't. One aunt actually told me, "You should have stayed silent and prayed about it," as though silence was holiness, as though women were meant to absorb humiliation forever if motherhood was involved. Denise nearly exploded when I told her. "Oh, now everybody cares about morality after Vanessa spent years monetizing your pain." I rubbed my forehead tiredly. "I just don't know anymore." Denise softened slightly. "You still love her?" "Of course I do." "Then stop expecting yourself not to hurt." That night, I made the mistake of checking Vanessa's social media again. Her follower count was dropping rapidly. Hundreds of thousands gone within days. Brand collaborations vanished from her page one by one. Comments flooded every post. "Liar. Fake. Your mom deserved better." One comment hit me especially hard. "She traded her mother for status." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Because maybe that was the simplest truth underneath all this. Vanessa had spent so many years climbing upward socially that eventually she started treating her origins like something diseased. And I represented those origins. Not intentionally, not maliciously. I was simply evidence of where she came from. Around midnight, Denise found me crying quietly in the kitchen. She wrapped her arms around me immediately. "I didn't want this," I whispered against her shoulder. "I know. I wanted her to stop lying. That's all." Denise pulled back gently, and she still can. I frowned slightly. "What do you mean she still hasn't apologized?" That was true. Even after everything. Even after the evidence. Vanessa still framed herself as the victim publicly, which somehow made everything sadder, because it meant she was still clinging to the illusion instead of facing reality. The next morning, I received another call, this time from Evelyn Brooks. Her voice sounded utterly drained. "She's refusing to leave the apartment." My stomach tightened immediately. "What, she won't answer most calls? She barely eats." "Honestly," Evelyn hesitated, "I'm worried about her." Maternal panic surged through me so fast it nearly made me dizzy. "Is she alone?" "Yes." I stood up immediately before catching myself. Part of me wanted to drive to Chicago that second. Another part whispered, "She would have never come running for you." The conflict nearly tore me apart internally. Evelyn continued carefully, "I know this situation is terrible, but I think Vanessa's entire identity just collapsed." That sentence settled heavily inside me. Identity, not reputation. Identity. Because Vanessa hadn't just lied to others. She'd lied to herself for so long that maybe she no longer knew where performance ended. After the call, I walked slowly through my quiet house. Past family photos lined the hallway walls. Vanessa at age 6 holding a pumpkin. Vanessa in her graduation cap. Vanessa hugging me beside our Christmas tree years before fame. I stopped in front of one picture for a long time. She was maybe 13 there. Smiling widely. Missing one front tooth. Completely unguarded. Back before, shame hollowed her out from the inside. And suddenly, for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I stopped feeling angry, not because she deserved forgiveness yet, because I finally understood something heartbreaking. Vanessa had spent years building a fake perfect identity because deep down she believed the real one was unlovable. And somehow, despite everything she'd done, that realization hurt worse than the lies themselves. A week after the podcast disaster, I found myself sitting alone in my living room holding an old photo album across my lap. Outside, snow drifted quietly through the Cleveland streets. Inside the house, smelled faintly like coffee and dust and old memories. I hadn't opened that album in years. Maybe because photographs can become dangerous once people start changing. Every picture feels like evidence of someone you can no longer reach. I turned the pages slowly. Vanessa, at 5 years old, sitting on Daniel's shoulders at the county fair. Vanessa dressed as an angel for a church Christmas play. Vanessa grinning beside a second-hand bicycle we could barely afford. Then I stopped at a picture from middle school, and suddenly, everything made a different kind of sense. Vanessa stood near her locker, wearing faded jeans and a coat clearly too small for her growing body. Even frozen in a photograph, I could see the tension in her smile. That was around the time the bullying started. I closed my eyes slowly. For years, I told myself Vanessa became ashamed because fame changed her. But sitting there with that photo album, I realized the shame started long before social media ever entered her life. It started in childhood, back when poverty makes you visible in all the wrong ways. I remembered one winter morning vividly. Vanessa was 13. I had just come home after a brutal overnight hospital shift when I found her crying in the kitchen before school. "What happened?" I asked immediately. She wiped her face angrily. "Nothing." "Vanessa." Finally, she exploded. "They make fun of my clothes." The pain in her voice nearly shattered me even then. "Who does?" "Everybody." I remember pulling her into my arms while she shook with humiliation. "They say I smell like thrift stores." God, even now remembering that makes my chest ache. I spent my entire adult life trying to protect her from poverty's cruelty. But maybe some wounds happen before mothers can stop them. Vanessa became obsessed with appearances after that. At first, it was normal teenage insecurity. She begged for expensive shoes we couldn't afford, straightened her hair to fit in better at school, started hiding where we lived from classmates. Then came the invitations she never accepted. Birthday parties, sleepovers, school events. "I don't want people seeing our house," she admitted once through tears. Back then, I thought she would outgrow it. Instead, the shame rooted itself deeper. After Daniel died, things became worse financially. There were months when I genuinely didn't know how we'd survive. I clipped coupons obsessively, bought canned soup in bulk, repaired shoes instead of replacing them, and Vanessa noticed all of it. Children always notice more than parents realize. One evening, when she was 15, she came home furious after school. "What happened now?" I asked carefully. She threw her backpack onto the floor. A girl asked me if we were poor. I froze. "What did you say?" Vanessa looked at me with tears burning in her eyes. I lied. That memory haunted me now. Because maybe that was the beginning. The first time lying felt safer than truth. I kept turning pages in the photo album, and suddenly I saw the transformation more clearly than ever before. Vanessa's smile changed over the years. As a child, it looked open. As a teenager, guarded. By adulthood, perfected, curated, like even happiness became performance eventually. Around noon, Denise came over carrying groceries again, because apparently she'd decided I couldn't be trusted to feed myself anymore. She found me surrounded by old photographs. "Oh no," she muttered. "Memory lane is dangerous territory." I smiled weakly. I think I finally understand her. Denise sat carefully beside me. "That doesn't excuse what she did." "I know." I showed her the middle school photo. She used to get bullied for being poor. Denise studied the picture quietly. "We all knew that." "No," I whispered. I don't think I really understood how deeply it affected her. Denise sighed softly. "Shame changes people." I nodded slowly, because that was exactly it. Vanessa didn't just want success. She wanted distance from humiliation. Distance from every moment she felt small growing up. And somewhere along the way, I became part of what she wanted distance from. Not because I abused her, because I reminded her of struggle. I stood up and walked toward the kitchen window slowly. When she looked at me in that ballroom, I whispered, "I don't think she saw her mother." Denise stayed quiet. She saw Cleveland. Poverty, cheap clothes, every awful thing she spent years trying to escape. Denise leaned back against the couch. "That's incredibly sad." "It is." But Jade Denise's voice sharpened slightly. "Sad people can still become cruel." I nodded again. Because understanding someone's pain doesn't erase the damage they cause. Still, something inside me softened after that realization. Not forgiveness, not yet, but clarity. Vanessa had built an entirely new identity because she believed the original version of herself was unacceptable. And maybe social media simply rewarded the lie until she couldn't separate performance from survival anymore. That evening, I made another mistake. I watched old interviews Vanessa had done years earlier. Not the recent defensive ones, the early interviews, before the fame became overwhelming, before the polished branding swallowed her whole. In one clip, a younger Vanessa sat nervously inside a tiny podcast studio, laughing awkwardly while discussing her childhood. "We struggled a lot growing up," she admitted softly. But back then, there was no bitterness in her voice. No hatred toward me, just embarrassment, human embarrassment. Then the interviewer asked, "Who supported you most?" And without hesitation, Vanessa smiled. "My mom." I stared at the screen, because for one brief moment, the real Vanessa still existed there. The one before millions of followers and luxury branding taught her vulnerability could become profitable content. Tears blurred my vision suddenly. I missed that version of my daughter so badly, it physically hurt. Around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Not a public statement, not a dramatic message, just 3 words. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. My heart pounded painfully. Part of me wanted to ignore her completely. Another part still reacted like a mother hearing her child cry through a locked door. Finally, I typed back, when her reply came immediately. "Tonight." I swallowed hard. Then another message appeared. "Please." That word undid me instantly, because beneath all the lies and cruelty and internet chaos, she still sounded like my little girl for 1 second. And maybe that made me weak. Or maybe it simply made me a mother. Either way. An hour later, headlights pulled into my driveway. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Vanessa came home. I almost didn't open the door. When Vanessa's car pulled into my driveway, my entire body locked with panic. Not fear of her, fear of what was left between us. Through the front window, I watched her sit inside the car for nearly 2 full minutes without moving. The porch light reflected faintly across the windshield, but I could still tell immediately that something about her looked different. Smaller somehow. Not physically, emotionally. Gone was the polished influencer who commanded rooms full of investors and cameras. This woman sat alone, gripping the steering wheel like she was holding herself together by force. Finally, she stepped out. No designer heels, no glamorous coat, no perfect makeup. She wore an oversized gray sweatshirt and black leggings. Her hair was tied back messily, and even from the window, I could see how swollen her eyes looked. She looked exhausted. Human. For one terrible second, all I saw was my little girl again. Then I remembered the ballroom, the podcast, the lies. I opened the door slowly. Vanessa stared at me silently. Neither of us moved. Then she whispered, "Hi." That one word nearly shattered me, because it sounded so fragile. I stepped aside quietly. She walked inside. The house smelled like coffee and cinnamon candles. Familiar, warm, ordinary. Vanessa looked around slowly, like she hadn't been there in years. Maybe emotionally she hadn't. "I forgot how small this place is," she said softly. The comment stung immediately, though I don't think she meant it cruelly this time. I crossed my arms instinctively. "You used to love this house." Vanessa swallowed hard. "I know." Silence settled heavily between us. Finally, I gestured toward the kitchen. "Do you want coffee?" She nodded slightly. We sat across from each other at the same kitchen table where I had once helped her with math homework and college applications and heartbreaks. Now we looked like strangers trying to remember each other. Vanessa stared into her coffee cup for a long time before speaking. "I lost almost everything this week. I stayed quiet. Marcus left." "I know. My management team dropped me yesterday." Something twisted painfully inside my chest. Even now, hearing her voice crack hurt me. Vanessa laughed bitterly. "Do you know what's funny?" I didn't answer. "I spent years being terrified people would see where I came from." Her eyes slowly lifted toward mine. "And now millions of people know anyway." I inhaled slowly. "You could have told the truth from the beginning." She looked away instantly. "You don't understand." "No," I said quietly. "I think I finally do." That made her freeze. For several seconds, she just stared at me. Then finally, she whispered, "I was so embarrassed growing up." There it was. Not anger, not manipulation. The real wound underneath everything. Tears filled her eyes immediately. "You have no idea what school felt like. I know kids bullied you. You don't know how bad it got." Her voice trembled harder now. "They laughed at my clothes. They laughed at our house. They laughed because Dad died, and we couldn't afford things anymore." I closed my eyes briefly, because every word felt like another failure I could never repair. Vanessa wiped angrily at her tears. Every time somebody came near me socially, I panicked they'd find out who I really was. "Who were you really?" "A poor girl from Cleveland, with a widowed mother who worked all the time." The sentence hit like a slap. "I worked all the time because I was trying to feed you." I know, she snapped suddenly. Silence crashed into the room afterward. Vanessa pressed both hands against her face. "I know," she repeated weakly. "God, I know." I stared at her quietly, And for the first time in years, she looked ashamed. Not performative shame, real shame, the kind that bends people inward. When I got successful, Vanessa whispered everything changed. How people liked me. Her voice cracked completely. Do you understand what that felt like? I didn't answer? People who would have ignored me before suddenly wanted to know me. Rich people, important people, beautiful people. She laughed shakily through tears, and I became addicted to it. The honesty startled me. Vanessa looked around the kitchen slowly. At first, I only changed little things. My clothes, the way I talked. Then she looked directly at me. But eventually, you started reminding me of everything I hated about myself. That hurt more than every public insult combined. Because this wasn't rage anymore. It was truth. When people looked at you, Vanessa whispered, I saw where I came from. My throat tightened painfully. So you erased me. No, she cried immediately. I didn't mean for it to become this bad. You told people I neglected you. I know. You called me toxic. I know. You stood in front of millions of people and acted like you survived despite me instead of because of me. Vanessa started crying harder. I know. Something inside me broke then. Not violently, just completely. I buried myself so you could stand taller, I whispered. Vanessa froze. The kitchen became so quiet, I could hear the refrigerator humming softly behind us. I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. Not the influencer. Not the liar. Not the villain the internet created. Just a wounded woman sitting in my kitchen drowning in consequences she helped create. And somehow, that made everything sadder. I gave you every piece of myself, I said quietly, and you spent years teaching the world to be ashamed of me. Vanessa covered her mouth with trembling hands. I'm sorry. The words came out broken, small, human. Tears finally slid down my own face too. Do you know what hurt most? She shook her head silently. You looked at me like I was something dirty. Vanessa started sobbing openly then. I hated being poor, she cried. I hated feeling small all the time. I know. And when I became successful? She struggled to breathe. I thought if I became perfect enough, nobody could ever humiliate me again. I leaned back slowly in my chair. But perfection built on lies doesn't survive. Vanessa nodded weakly. I know that now. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then finally, she whispered, Do you hate me? The question shattered me instantly, because despite everything, she still sounded like a little girl asking whether love had finally run out. I wiped my face slowly. No. Vanessa broke down again at that answer. But I don't trust you anymore, I added quietly. That hurt her visibly. Good. Some truths are supposed to hurt. I don't even trust myself anymore, she admitted. And strangely enough, that was the most honest thing she'd said all night. Around 2 a.m, Vanessa finally stood to leave. At the front door, she hesitated. I think I need to tell the truth publicly, she whispered. I looked at her carefully. For the right reasons this time. Vanessa nodded slowly. Then before leaving, she asked something that nearly broke me again. Do you think it's too late for me to become someone Dad would have been proud of? Tears burned my eyes instantly, because beneath all the fame and lies and shame, she was still searching for home, and maybe that was the tragedy of all of this. Vanessa spent years running from humiliation so desperately, she accidentally ran from herself too. Vanessa disappeared from the internet for 4 days. No posts, no live streams, no statements. And somehow that silence created even more noise online. People speculated endlessly. Some claimed she was hiding. Others said she was planning another manipulation campaign. A few even accused me of destroying her mental health. I stopped reading comments by then. At some point, surviving public scrutiny becomes less about defending yourself and more about protecting what little peace remains inside your chest. Still, I couldn't stop worrying. That's the humiliating truth about motherhood. Even after your child burns your life down, part of you still checks whether they've eaten dinner. On the fifth night, Denise came over carrying soup and found me pacing near the kitchen window. "You're waiting for her," she said immediately. I sighed. She said she wanted to tell the truth. And I don't know if she will. Denise sat her purse down carefully. "You know what I think. What I think your daughter finally got tired of performing. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to believe that." Around 9 o'clock that evening, my phone exploded with notifications again. My stomach dropped instantly. For one terrifying second, I thought something awful had happened. Then I saw the alert. Vanessa Graham posted a new video. My hands started shaking immediately. Denise grabbed the remote and turned on the television while I opened the video on my phone at the same time. The screen faded in slowly, and I almost didn't recognize my daughter. There was no glamorous lighting, no styled background, no designer clothing. Vanessa sat alone at what looked like her apartment kitchen table, wearing a plain black sweatshirt. Her face was bare, no makeup, no filters, no carefully crafted image. She looked exhausted, human, afraid. For several seconds, she said nothing. She just stared into the camera, breathing unevenly. Then finally she whispered, "My name is Vanessa Graham." And I lied. The internet practically stopped breathing. Even Denise went completely still beside me. Vanessa swallowed hard. I spent years building an image that wasn't real because I was ashamed of where I came from. Tears filled her eyes immediately, but this time they looked different. Not controlled, not cinematic, real. My mother did not neglect me, she continued shakily. She sacrificed everything for me. My chest tightened painfully. Vanessa looked down briefly before continuing. "I told people I raised myself because the truth felt humiliating." She wiped her face roughly. The truth was that my mother worked herself nearly to death trying to give me opportunities she never had. I covered my mouth with trembling fingers. Beside me, Denise stayed silent for once. Vanessa inhaled shakily. When I became successful, online people loved my story. The girl who survived alone? The girl who escaped poverty through hard work. She laughed bitterly. And eventually, I started loving that version of myself too. The honesty in her voice made tears spill down my cheeks instantly, because that version didn't feel weak. Silence followed. Then Vanessa said the words I never expected to hear publicly. I was ashamed of my mother because I was ashamed of myself. The comment section exploded so fast it became unreadable. Thousands upon thousands of messages flooded in instantly. But Vanessa kept going. When my mother showed up at my launch party, she reminded me of everything I spent years trying to erase. Her voice cracked violently, and instead of being grateful, I humiliated her. I started crying quietly then, not because the pain disappeared, because hearing truth after so many lies felt almost unbearable. Vanessa looked directly into the camera. "My mother did save me years ago from a mistake that could have destroyed my future. And instead of honoring that mercy, I rewrote the story to make myself look stronger." Then finally, she broke completely. Real sobs, the kind people can't fake because they distort your entire face. "I hurt the person who loved me most?" She cried. The internet watched in absolute silence, No music, no edits, no branding, just grief. Vanessa eventually wiped her eyes again and whispered, "If my mother never forgives me, I understand." My heart physically ached hearing that. But she deserved the truth, and so did everyone else. Then she looked down for several seconds before speaking one final time. "I spent so much time trying to become someone impressive that I forgot how to be someone honest." And then the video ended. Denise exhaled slowly beside me. "Well," she murmured, "that was real." I couldn't speak. I just sat there crying quietly while the internet reacted in real time. And strangely enough, the reaction wasn't what I expected. Some people still hated Vanessa. Some called the apology too late. Others accused her of only apologizing because she got caught. But many people responded differently. Not with admiration, with recognition. Because shame is universal. Millions of people know what it feels like to hate the parts of themselves that remind them where they came from. Even if they never admit it aloud, within hours, reaction channels changed tone completely. The conversation shifted from evil daughter exposed to something sadder and more human. A woman who abandoned herself trying to escape humiliation. That night, Vanessa texted me, "I'm sorry. No performance, no explanations. Just those 2 words." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Thank you for telling the truth." 3 dots appeared immediately, then vanished, then appeared again. Finally, her message came through. "I don't know who I became." That sentence broke my heart more than everything else combined. Because deep down, I think she genuinely meant it. Over the next week, Vanessa vanished from social media entirely. Not dramatically, quietly. Her management company officially parted ways with her. Most sponsors never returned. Marcus never contacted her again. And oddly enough, none of that seemed to matter anymore. Because once someone finally tells the truth after years of performing, the performance itself becomes exhausting. One afternoon, I drove to the grocery store and an older woman stopped me near the cereal aisle. "You're Jade Graham, aren't you?" I tensed automatically, but she smiled gently. "I just wanted to tell you something." I waited nervously. "My daughter and I called each other after watching your story." Tears filled her eyes slightly. We hadn't spoken in 8 months. Emotion clogged my throat instantly. The woman squeezed my hand softly. "Thank you." After she walked away, I stood frozen beside the cereal boxes, trying not to cry in public. Because suddenly, I realized something important. This story had never really been about internet fame, or cancellation, or revenge. It was about shame. The kind families inherit quietly. The kind that grows in silence until people start hurting the ones who loved them most. And maybe, just maybe, the truth had finally interrupted that cycle before it destroyed us completely. It's been almost a year since the internet watched my family fall apart. And if you walked into my life today, you probably wouldn't recognize the chaos we survived. Vanessa no longer lives in that luxury high-rise apartment in Chicago. She left the influencer world quietly. No dramatic farewell, no comeback strategy. She simply disappeared from the version of herself that had slowly poisoned her from the inside. For a while, we barely spoke. Healing sounds beautiful when people talk about it online, but in real life, healing is awkward and slow and uncomfortable. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like crying in grocery store parking lots. Sometimes it looks like sitting across from someone at dinner while both of you carefully avoid old wounds because you're afraid one wrong sentence will tear everything open again. But slowly, things changed. About 3 months after her apology video, Vanessa started volunteering at a women's community center in Cleveland. No cameras, No sponsorships, no content. Just work. Real work. Helping teenage girls from low-income families prepare for college interviews. Organizing donated clothing, serving meals on weekends. The first time I visited the center, I stood quietly near the doorway watching her help a nervous teenage girl practice a scholarship speech. Vanessa's voice sounded gentle again. Patient. Human. And suddenly, for the first time in years, I caught a glimpse of the daughter I thought I had lost forever. Afterward, we went to dinner together at a small diner nearby. Nothing fancy, no marble floors, no investors, just two women trying to rebuild something broken. Vanessa stirred cream into her coffee quietly before finally saying, "I spent so many years trying to become someone impressive that I forgot how to become someone good." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Not because everything was fixed, not because the pain disappeared, but because healing begins the moment people stop pretending. Our relationship still isn't perfect. Maybe it never will be again. Some wounds leave scars even after they close. But every Sunday evening now Vanessa comes over for dinner. Sometimes we laugh. Sometimes conversations become quiet and heavy. Sometimes we still hurt each other accidentally. But now, there's honesty in the room again. And honesty breathes differently than performance. A few weeks ago, Vanessa found the old cream-colored dress in my closet, the one I wore the night she humiliated me. She held it carefully for a long time before whispering, "I can't believe I made you feel ashamed wearing this." I smiled sadly. "You didn't make me ashamed of myself." Tears filled her eyes instantly. And in that moment, I realized something important. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is deciding the wound will no longer control the rest of your life. Sometimes people destroy each other because they are trying desperately to escape their own pain. That doesn't excuse cruelty. But understanding pain can stop cruelty from becoming permanent. Vanessa once believed success could erase shame. But shame buried alive doesn't disappear. It spreads into relationships, into lies, into identity. The only thing that finally saved us was truth. Painful truth. Humiliating truth. Healing truth. And maybe that's the lesson hidden inside this entire story. The people who love us should never become the price we pay to feel accepted by the world. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever forgiven someone who deeply hurt you? Or have you ever realized you hurt someone because of your own hidden pain? Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I truly read more comments than you know, especially late at night when the world gets quiet. And if stories about family healing, forgiveness, and second chances mean something to you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. You never know who might need to hear a story like this at exactly the right moment.